Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. Welcome to the Change Management Simplified podcast, where we will explain and discuss what change management is really about, using real examples alongside principles of change management based on our experiences on projects, transformations, change initiatives, and of course, the home experiences as well. Thank you for returning back to listen to part 2 of the emotional intelligence of relationship management episode. Um, we will be focusing on the actual question: how do you develop and benefit from emotional intelligence of relationship management? And why is it essential to your success, leadership, and in life as well, personal life? Because we need to apply this in every single scenario that we go through in life. So this is episode 10, but part 2 of the emotional intelligence relationship episode. As I've mentioned before or earlier in the previous episode, Spotify has now given us we now qualify for opening up a subscription process on Spotify. To my Spotify listeners, thank you for listening. We have hit the number 100 from Spotify listeners. Please continue to listen, and I'm hoping you're returning and listening to me now because you like and enjoy these episodes. Please continue to share with others, and let's make this podcast bigger, and let's share the experiences. And yes, please continue to submit your questions in. Please add a comment to my colleagues. I appreciate your feedback that you send me on Teams one-to-one. Also, please do add some feedback on to the actual episode so that other people can see your lovely comments, and also any questions that you'd like me to address in this scenario of change management and leadership, because these two components are core to our growth. And as you all know, and as all we see, we're growing into our careers. We're all striving to get to those leadership top positions, but also we're growing as human beings, as adults, as mothers, as fathers, as parents, as grandparents, aunties. And we learn from all these experiences. I will continue to mix it up, have work examples with personal normal life examples, because I'd like this to be a discussive and a relatable podcast with episodes that actually really do make you think about how we do things, but also how we can learn to avoid all the pitfalls that some of us have gone through. In this particular part of the relationship management episode, we will focus on when it goes wrong, how it goes wrong, how to develop relationship management, and the benefits of relationship management. So when does it go wrong? Really, when you think about the examples that I've given you, especially in the personal one, personal normal life ones, it's really where leaders or individuals lack empathy. If you're gonna be able to manage a relationship, you need to have empathy. You need to be able to understand how someone else feels. Um, if it's from a project perspective, you have to have empathy towards those impacted stakeholders. Try and understand what they are feeling. Put yourself in their shoes. If you cannot do that, then it will be a little bit difficult for you to understand how you can actually drive through this change, but also how you can talk and continue to influence this change and try and get them on board and get their support for them to feel like this is also value to them, and their opportunities to come along with this change is not the end of their jobs. Um, Also, the other time when it goes wrong is where you find leaders who just clearly undervalue and do not respect one, the project team or the individuals they work with, and the stakeholders. And that is the worst thing that you would want, to show your stakeholders or those you work with that you don't respect them. Because once you show that, they also lose respect for you. Um, and they would never go out of their way or beyond to go above and beyond to help you out in a situation or even work overtime if needed. They will not, they will start to apply the actual employment rights of working and not even care about what you do or what the implications are, because at the end of the day you've said you don't respect them and therefore you only care about yourself. um, and again, another thing where you when it goes wrong is I hate this, and this happens very often. Leaders or individuals who pretend to be, they don't pretend. Well, they do pretend. You're hearing what the stakeholder, the impacted stakeholder, is saying, but not listening, because you've made your prejudgment about what you think they should be saying, what you think the answer is, and not really actually critically listening to what they're saying. From a change perspective, I'm usually the first person who encounters the frustration from everybody, um, where they're upset, where things are not going wrong. They honestly tell me how they feel. However, how I do, how I actively take away from those discussions or from those vents is I have to listen. And even if even if the discussion or the conversation between me and them was for, let's say, 30 minutes, believe it or not, it could be something they said for a minute out of the whole 30-minute conversation that's actually the root cause of all this frustration. And it's for me to actively listen to what they're saying and actually pick out what is the underlying issue they're saying to me, because that could be the same issue that 10 other people are facing. So if one person actually says something, I have to do something about it, but I have to look in between and read between the lines, where is this underlying problem, for me to be able to actually come up with a strategy or a plan in place to be able to resolve or to make the situation favorable. And then a classic example here is end users. When a transformation lead does not listen to the end users, I can guarantee you, you will not be successful at transition phase. Because as much as you have the power at the beginning, and I've said this in the previous episodes, as much as you have the power in the beginning, scoping out work, you have the big budget, you somehow, your ego is inflated because you've got this big position. What you're forgetting is, if you do not listen to the stakeholders' input, feedback that they're saying, no, this requirement doesn't meet our standard, this is what we need, and you're just pushing through things just to tick a box because you need to go back to, say, the exec committee. Yes, we've reached this milestone, we've ticked that box, but not actually taking into account of potentially making improvements to some of the configurations to a system, let's say reporting system. It will come to a point where the outputs are coming out, and the end user or the functional leads that are impacted directly by this system will have more power and influence over the success of whether you actually move forward, progress forward with this system or not. And that's what most transformation leads forget. Power gets to them, the ego is inflated, that they disregard all the impacted stakeholders' feedback, but also to remember to respect their feedback, as I said so before. When it comes to you, because you can't make the project successful without handing it over to the end users. You need the end users to sign off to say, yes, we are happy with the requirements. It will be a shock to you. It will come as a shock to you when they refuse to sign it off. And this has happened in several projects that I've worked on. And then the transformation lead ends up being upset and decides in their own immature, selfish way that that team is being resistance to change. No, it's not being resistance to a change. It's they're saying what you are delivering or what you've delivered to them is not up to standard. It's not fit for purpose. That there is a difference between change resistance to you not meeting what the requirements were. So, transformation leads actively listen to the feedback from the impacted stakeholders, especially when it comes to requirements, because they will either dictate whether you have a job or not at the end of this transformation, if you ever get to that transformation change. Um, how does it go wrong? Um, I'm going to use a similar example. It's where A classic scenario is where a transformation lead, again, I'm going to keep this based on work, where a transformation lead becomes the ringleader for the conflict between teams. And again, this is where, as a ringleader, I'm calling them a ringleader, the transformation lead again feels very self-centered. They have too much power. No one can tell them what to do except for themselves. They decide as and when what they want to do, and don't really build an inclusive project team or steering group around them. And therefore, with their selfish attitude, they actually end up recruiting direct reports who have similar personality traits. And then you end up getting this clique of people leading a transformation, but they only believe in what they do is the best, and therefore anyone else they don't listen to. um, and the way they speak to people, they're the best. They're the reason why they're in those positions because they're the best. You cannot think actually, not really. You cannot be a leader and be an expert in everything. You know, you need the other stakeholders to be able to make it a success, to make it collaborative, to make it even more creative, and even maybe produce something better than what you initially scoped out. Um, and we had this scenario on one of the projects, and this particular transformation lead ended up upsetting every single finance function that we had, to the point that none of these functions actually wanted to talk to us. They would never even come around our project area. However, me as a change manager stroke project manager, I always spoke to every single one of them. They would, again, relay back their frustration, their feedback, and I always try to find a way to make it amicable. However, that particular transformation lead also realized when it was too late that none of them wanted to talk to him, and therefore he had to get me to try and talk to them to build a relationship with these guys for him to be able to talk to them. However, in the meetings, it was so tense. You could read the body language that none of them actually wanted to be there. However, we needed to have this meeting. But the question is, did we really have to get to that point? Did the transformation lead really have to just always have this conflicting behavior? And how can a senior management not see this? I'm not going to blame senior management in this case because some cases this particular individual behaved very differently in front of the exec committee, in front of his bosses, very differently to when he was working with his peers and us on the project team. I'm going to leave that one to that. I'll bring a more detailed example on that particular scenario in another episode around stakeholder management.
Now, if you find this podcast beneficial and interesting to listen to, do me a favor. Please press follow and subscribe and share with your friends and families.
Now, how do you develop relationship management? You gotta have some love, some trust, and care. Yes, I'm not asking you to have deep love, like personal love you would at home or in your personal life, but you just gotta love your work and the people that you are working with. You gotta build trust, and this comes from both ways. People have to trust you as much as they trust, as much as you trust them. So do things or work in a way where it shows that you trust them to do something, empower them. Empowering people helps build that working relationship because that means you trust in what they do, their experience, and therefore they can work with you. But also when they're stuck, be present to help them, guide them, and don't throw them under the bus. Some leaders, when they can't answer questions, they throw other people under the bus. That doesn't go down very well, believe me. Um, However, these three components of relationship management, they're fundamental. They're fundamental to you building this sustainable relationship with these individuals that you have to work with and become successful over time. So ask yourself, do you really care about the people you work with and you care about the company? Secondly, do you need these people to be successful, to do the work that you need them to do to be successful? Now, if it's yes, then I suggest you better genuinely start to care, and try and understand and build these relationships with these individuals, working relationships. It doesn't have to be personal. No deep relationships here are to be built. The other thing you have to do, we mentioned it in episode 8 and also in episode 7, know your audience. If you know your audience, if you know the individuals you're working with, if you don't know them, change management will perform a stakeholder impact for you. They will, which tells you what is appropriate, what is important to each stakeholder, and how you can communicate to them. Understand, take time to read through and understand that impact assessment. Work with your change management practitioner. I do this with all my senior stakeholders that I work with, the transformation leads, the CFOs, I'm constantly talking and reminding them about their stakeholders. No, don't, and their target audience and the messaging, because every stakeholder group is different. So you need to read the audience and then articulate the message in appropriate and meaningful way that is relatable to them. The other thing you have to do, you need to relate to the stakeholder. And this is where, again, the stakeholder impact assessment comes in, and actively apply emotional intelligence. How do you develop it? We mentioned it before. You need to be self-aware, the first component of emotional intelligence. Recognize and know your emotions and understand them. You need to be able to self-manage your emotions and your reactions and understand how that impacts or adversely impacts others. If you know how it adversely impacts others, you will consciously behave and react in a more positive way, but not in a ridiculous, outrageous way. No one likes adverse attention. The other third component you have to do is develop social awareness. This we talked about in episode 8. Recognize and understand those around you, their emotions. To understand their emotions, you need to understand your emotions, because if you can understand yours, then you can easily also understand and recognize where someone's emotions are not best placed at the moment, but they're reacting in a way that's not best placed, or most appropriate, and therefore you can quickly turn the negative into positive. You can handle conflict much better. So it's important that once you understand those individuals' emotions from being socially aware, put yourself in their shoes, you know, then manage the response. You can build better relationships out of just managing someone's emotions better and productively and positively, because you're not passing that negative, judgmental perspective to the situation, because it could be a one-off and no one should be held accountable, or for the rest of their life of working with you for just one particular scenario. Find a positive way of turning the negative into a positive.
Now, if you find this podcast beneficial and interesting to listen to, do me a favor. Please press follow and subscribe and share with your friends and families.
Lastly, what are the benefits of relationship management? This should not be a surprise. We all know this, but I know it's difficult to practice them, but we have to continuously practice it. But the benefits of this is, one, you lead stronger, working relationships with your teams, and you have the ability now to positively drive more team collaboration and high team performance with great teamwork. This is what you need in a working environment, even at home. However, I'm going to stick to work. You want to have that environment where it's not toxic, it's positive. You get the best out of people. Even they themselves come up with more creative ideas that they didn't know, if the working environment is a collaborative and a great one to work with, and the people around get along. As we said, no one wants to work in a toxic environment, and no one wants to work for a bad boss. So try and find a positive way of actually managing this relationship and creating that positive environment. Being able to also manage relationship puts you in a better position to influence, to negotiate, and to persuade effectively the stakeholders around you. And again, stakeholder management comes into this, but this is at the back of the stakeholder impact. And maybe I will talk about stakeholder management next to help, emphasize the criticalness of how you can manage relationships across stakeholders. But if you know your stakeholders, you know what impacts them, you know what is of their best interest, what do they care about, what's in it for them. It's important for you to understand what's in it for them. You can then come up with better responses, actually, even if it's not scripted. And it shouldn't be really actually scripted when you're having conversations, discussions with people, or in a meeting or an exec meeting. um, you'll be able to at least be in a better position to respond to their questions appropriately, using the right messaging, but also putting yourself in their shoes makes it better for you to react to some of the questions, because by understanding where someone's coming from, you're able to also relate and then be able to respond appropriately. This will help you build that ongoing support, and the fact that people see that you understand the impact on them, then they actually perceive it that you care. You'll also have the ability to manage conflict amicably, and raise awareness of the shared values, um, that those that conflict, um, because when you're in a conflict, we're all human beings. You lose sight of the actual vision, the goal. But as you've gone, as you've built up, developed all these four components of emotional intelligence, you can quickly look and observe the situation and be able to intervene in a conflict where people are completely stretched, from opposite directions and angles. You can actually find a way to bring them together. Um, you know and then the other thing is, what you don't usually understand or realize you're doing is you become inspirational. Some people set out to be inspirational, and those are usually quite cocky. This the cocky ones, you actually usually see them that they're just cocky. However, to me, my best leaders, effective leaders, the inspiring ones, the ones that make me feel like I'd like to have some of the skill sets that they have, but how do I go about that? It's the leaders that indirectly, you know, inspire, and lead, and become mentors. They don't realize they're becoming mentors from a distance. But when you get someone approach you and say to you randomly, could you become my mentor? You should pat yourself on the back, because that's a person who's watched you from a distance, observed you from a distance, saw the way you carry yourself, the way you communicate, the way you lead the team, the way you message, whatever message you might be putting out there, and they're inspired, and the qualities that they admire and would like to learn and develop with the help of your mentoring. So if you get someone who approaches you for mentorship, pat on the back. Much respect, you're a great leader. If you don't have one, think about it. Maybe you need to develop some emotional intelligence and become an effective leader, yet alone inspirational. Um, okay. And then the other thing is, you tend to positively rise up above the situation. You read the room. Some people have lost their way. They've made whatever the scenario might be about, it might be very personal. They've started to make it personal. It takes a lot from someone to take a step back and to say, okay, what is this really about? It's like, as I said, in my change role, I could equally just get upset and just say, why is everyone coming to complain to me all the time? I'm tired. And actually, to be honest with you, being a change in the change management role is the people aspect role that's mentally quite draining. And that's where it becomes complex as a role, that you have to always take a step back and remember that you are working with people, and they need to let out that frustration. It's not about you, me as the change practitioner. It's about everything else. And I have to try and always take that approach for me not to feel like I'm doing something wrong, or I'm not listening to them, or they are blaming me for the situation. Um, and then lastly, it allows you to realize what the role is about. And the role is not really about you being the, I don't know, the greatest in the world or in the company. It's actually just you being a great leader. And being a great leader, I say it so softly, so calmly, like it's easy. It's not easy. Don't get me wrong. It's complicated being a leader, because you deal with different personalities, just like myself on the change management side. You have to be able to deal with all these personalities. Every single stakeholder's got different interests. Everyone else, every single person's got different expectations. And they also feel like you should care about their personal needs and their personal interests. And you have to find a way of merging all those and be able to satisfy all of them, but by getting the right balance. Not to overcommit and not to overpromise, but just getting the message and the deliverables right. That is important, and how you deliver that message is even much more important, because some leaders don't know how to communicate. You can be great at motivating people, you can be great at delivering, you could be an expert in the subject area for the change initiative, but if you cannot communicate the benefits, the reasons why we are, the objectives of why we're doing this change initiative, and how people can come on this journey and how you can engage them, who's going to know? How are they going to know what these benefits are? How are they going to know this purpose? So it's important for you to be a good communicator, um, because actually great communication gets you a long way. But also it makes you rise above that. All the chaos at the bottom. Yes, there will be chaos at the bottom beneath you, but you rise above it and filter out the right things that you want to say that will be appropriate and applicable to that target audience. Um, and you have to remember, to the first point, what do you care about? Do you care about these individuals? Do you care about the company? And again, you have to remember, um, to be an effective and successful leader, um, you're not working for yourself. That should be put at the back. You're working for your team and you're working for your company. If your team and your company is a success, you'll be a success. And therefore, it's important that you apply emotional intelligence with relationship management, because it's important. You cannot do this yourself. And to my last question, why is relationship management important? It's because you need it. And I'm going to repeat it. You need it if you've listened to the last 20 minutes or so. And it's essential to your success and your leadership, in both normal life, as we use Sheldon example with Amy, and also at work, as we've described in the different parts of the episode. Yes, some people might say, I don't have to have great relationships to get to the top. Yes, there might be a few of you who might sneak up to that top triangle. However, we all know that it will not last, and it didn't last for very long, with that type of behavior or with that type of thinking, because at the end of the day, you need people to work for you and work with you, and no one wants to work for someone who does not have emotional intelligence or even just apply emotional intelligence. If you're not self-aware, you cannot manage your emotions. You not can't so, socially relate to people and recognize their emotions to be able to manage the team and to direct them and to get the best out of them, yet alone manage a relationship. You'll be by yourself at the top, and you will either end up leaving the company very soon, or you decide to find a new job because you've burnt your bridges in that existing company because no one wants to work for you anymore. You threw them under the bus to get to the top. So you end up having to leave and find a job somewhere else. And then we do know you slightly start to adjust and start to apply some emotional intelligence because you realize that you actually need it. You need it to be successful, to remain up there, to keep your top job and get the big packages. So, on that note, that is the end of the emotional intelligence episodes. And the following episode, we will talk about stakeholders, the various stakeholders who have an impact on change management. Um, we've got the internal audit team. Internal audit. We will talk about stakeholders, how stakeholders play a critical role in your success and also in change management, because it's important for you to understand the journey that these stakeholders go on and be able to influence the positiveness at the right time in the right place, because a lot of some of the leaders or transformation leads just don't know how to manage their stakeholders, because this is not a solo transformation. It's involving a lot of people, and therefore all those have to be considered. And on that note, thank you for listening.
If you find this podcast beneficial or interesting, please press follow, like, or subscribe. Lastly, and of course, don't forget to spread the word by sharing. Thank you for listening.